Hello chess friends and welcome to Qa4 Chess channel and welcome back to the Tata Steel Masters in 2022. So we're following now another great game from the round 4. We are following now the brilliant game played by Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa against Nils Grandelius. So this is the game that you suggested me a lot here on my channel, and of course I wanted to cover it because especially I love it when Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa is playing, because he's of course the future of chess, like Alireza Firouzja, like all of these kids that are really playing brilliant chess, and of course we want to follow their careers because in the near future something could happen, of course, also with Rameshbabu's career, and I wish him all of the best because he's playing now a decent tournament here in the Tata Steel chess tournament. I think his success is not so important, but it's very important for him to see where he's standing among the sharks, how strong he is compared to Magnus Carlsen, how strong he is compared maybe to Sergei Karjakin, all of these other masters. So it's a huge and important event, I think, for Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa, not because of, as I said, not because he has to win something, but winning 2-3 games I think would be a great success for the young Indian chess player. So let's check out now what happened. Brilliant game it was. Here Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa with the white pieces, Nils Grandelius with the black pieces. So Prag opened with the move d4, Grandelius responds with knight to f6, c4, g6. The game can transpose now into the Greenfield or into the King's Indian. We have knight to c3 and we have now d5. The Greenfield defense is on the board. So many times, and I think there are millions and millions of games in the database, c takes d5 exchange variation perfectly fine. Knight to d5, e4, knight takes c3 and b takes c3. So the position has I think has been played many times. It's the most often of all Greenfield lines. After b takes c3, here bishop to g7 was played, and now an interesting opening choice by Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa, queen to a4. And the cool part about this move queen to a4 is that actually we're controlling the c5 square. I'm explaining you why, because there are now several moves what you can do. You can play maybe bishop to d7 or knight to d7. If you play bishop to d7, then you have the opportunity to play the move queen to a3, and in the normal Greenfield you would love, of course, to play the move c5, then knight to c6, and maybe even after knight to f3 something like bishop to g4. So basically we're attacking all of the pieces that are controlling the d4 square. So that's why with the move queen to a3, Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa would stop this potential progress immediately. So that's why here c5 isn't a possibility. The problem is now if you play knight to d7 like Grandelius did, okay, you can make the c5 move, but the problem is after knight to d7, you're not playing the move knight to c6. You would love, of course, to play c5 and then followed with knight to c6, because the move knight to c6 is keeping the pressure around the square d4. So okay, c5 is coming, but at least it's not coming with the move knight to c6. That would be a great continuation then for black, and then black would reach the normal Greenfield ideas, so would keep the pressure around the square d4. So with the move queen to a4, I think that always white is slowing down a little bit the pace of black's development. Good opening choice so far by the young Prag. So here after move knight to d7, knight to f3, normal development. I think we have queen to a3, and okay, c5 is still possible, but at least, as we said, this move c5 is not going to be followed with the move knight to c6. That would be then a problem, because the pressure around the square d4 I think would be simply too much to handle then for white. So after move c5 we have bishop to e2, normal development. Of course, taking is not a good choice. D takes c5, there are simply too many weaknesses. Queen to c7 could happen, the pawn on c3 is weakness, e4 is weakness, so simply too many clear targets here for black. So that's why normal development here by Prag. We have b6 by Grandelius, and now a beautiful move h4, immediately flank attack. Beautiful attack already, because the main goal is, of course, in some occasions to play h5, h takes g6, maybe even trade off somehow the dark square bishop, get the queen somehow, and maybe include the queen into the rook and queen battery here on the h file and deliver in checkmate. So because this flank attack is possible, because the center cannot be further challenged with the move knight to c6. As we said, that's why this move queen to a4, in my opinion, is beautiful theory here by Pragg. And now already a critical moment of the game. So there are now many choices what black can do. In my opinion, bishop to b7 or here h6 or h5, stopping white's progress on the king side are normal ideas. But here I think Nils Grandelius makes a huge positional mistake. He plays now the move e5, and e5 is a risky choice because after move d5 that of course Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa played, we have now the strategical element, which is now the so-called supported pass pawn. The supported pass pawn is maybe this position, but you see in a couple more moves, maybe when more pieces are traded off, if this position, for instance, the same pawn structure reaches the endgame, then white is simply winning the endgame because of the supported pass pawn. Black's king is always stuck to the defense. You cannot even go behind. Even if you go somewhere behind with the king, then if you, for instance, somehow take out with the king the pawn on e4, then this pawn simply gets pushed further. So that's why it's a huge positional problem. I think this move e5 that Grandelius played, e6 you can play maybe in the near future, stop a little bit white's progress, but as I said, e5 is simply too messed up, and I think after move d5 from this point on, white is really a comfortable game. Okay, what white basically needs to do is trade off more pieces, going into a favorable endgame where we have the supported pass. But you see now how Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa understands this position very well, and he's playing simply on a positional trade of pieces. So here after move knight to f6, the pawn on e4 is hanging. Of course, knight takes e5 is not working. Knight to e4 comes also with a direct threat here against the knight, so that's why it's not a huge problem here for black. So after move knight to f6, we have bishop to g5, and now queen to e8 here played by Grandelius. Bishop to f6 by Praggnanandhaa, we have bishop to f6, and now h5, bishop to g4, and now beautiful move knight to d2, because you see we have after move e5 also a little bit of a bad bishop here. The bishop is blocked out by its own pawn, so in a potential, let's see, bishop takes e2, king to e2, this bishop would be really bad. What I think black would need to do then afterwards is play something like bishop to g5, maybe try to trade it off. Let's see, bishop to g5, but even then rook to d1 is a possibility. It's not so easy, I think, even here for black to trade off the bad bishop for this good knight, because the good knight could maybe come here to c4. That would be then a beautiful square for the knight, and then the knight could be shifted over, knight to c4, knight to e3, many centralized squares the knight wants to control. But even rook to d1 is very important, because even if you try f5 to break through here on the king side, queen to b3 takes, rook takes d2, and even if you try maybe to open the f file, this is the most important thing. This pawn is marching with the support of the rook, then with the queen on d5, maybe black is in huge positional problems. You see the h file can get open, and actually white's king is perfectly fine here on e2. Really wild stuff. So even if, as I said, even if you try here to somehow trade off the bishop for a knight, it's not so easy for black to play the game, especially because of this supported pass pawn on the d file. So after move knight to d2, here Nils Grandelius realized that, as we said, going into an endgame it's not working here for black. Black has to make something out of this beautiful bishop pair, at least something. If you don't make anything out of the bishop pair, then you're strategically lost. That's the brutal truth about this move e5. That's why I really don't like the move e5. It gave, I think, Praggnanandhaa a beautiful game in the middle game stage. So here bishop to d7 played by Nils Grandelius. We have c4, and again, if you try even to break here on the queen side, it's not even better. Takes, and then h takes g6, rook to b1, queen to d7, and now queen to h3, simply trading off. Let's see, maybe something like queen to h3, rook to h3. Now you see we can use the square c4 here. We can double up on the b file. If the knight comes on c4, it cannot be kicked away anymore by any minor piece, so it will be a beautiful centralized knight. Again, I'm pointing out this bishop on f6 is simply a bad piece. So many things don't work here for black. As we said, trading off pieces is not working. Going into an endgame is not working. These are actually the things that white would love to get. So that's why with the move c4 here, Praggnanandhaa has really a beautiful setup in the center of the board, and it's a beautiful strategical game for white. So queen to e7, queen to c3, bishop to g7, queen to e3. We have now f5, h takes g6, h takes g6, and now a4, keeping the grip on the queen side, not allowing here the position to get open simply with a6 b5. Maybe it can happen, but it has to be further prepared. But even if you do that, if you manage to push somehow the b5 move, then you're leaving your c5 a little bit weak. So that's why here with the move a4, basically Praggnanandhaa is attacking the queen side. He's trying now to play the move a5 himself. So here bishop to f6, we have a5, bishop to g5, queen to h3, and again, okay, you could maybe take bishop takes d2, king to d2, and okay, you have to protect your the square h8, but now queen to h6 could be a possibility. And the problem is now again the supported pass pawn gives white here a dominant game. You can maybe play f4 something, but then queen to g5, rook to h6 is possible. So it's again a bad position for black. Again, also a takes b6 is a possibility, bishop to g4, queen to g4, then maybe somehow sneak in with the queen on e6. So again, the space advantage that you have in the center of the board causes now black many problems. So queen to h3, we have queen to g7, we have queen to c3, queen to f6, bishop to d3, queen to e7, and now knight to f3, finally kicking away the bishop, bishop to f6, queen to c2, we have rook to c8, a takes b6, a takes b6, and now even castling here by Rameshbabu. So we have now f4, which, okay, creates a space advantage on the king side, but it's further paralyzing. We have to agree, I think it's further paralyzing the dark square bishop. The dark square bishop gets worse and worse. If you push too many pawns on dark squares, the bishop is becoming the worst piece on the board. So that's why after move f4, we have a rook to a7. Here, very important pin on the 7th rank. We have queen to d6, and now bishop to e2. We have bishop to d8 here by Nils Grandelius. Maybe it was simply time somehow to include this rook into the game to compete maybe on the 7th rank. That could be some kind of a goal in order to simplify the game. Maybe it was time for Grandelius to realize his problems, that he cannot actually win the game, that he should probably go for draw, but he tried to get this bishop somehow probably to this diagonal into the game, but you see too many pawns are simply on dark squares. The bishop on d8 is simply a bad piece. So here we have knight to h2, we have bishop to c7, and now rook to a1. Important move, of course, getting use of the a file. That's the only open file. Okay, we have also the h file, but it's a long run if anyone wants to take over on the h file. So here Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa has taken over on the most important file on the a file. So here king to g7, bishop to g4. This is a beautiful positional trades of pieces, because as we said, black has a bad dark square bishop. The only good minor piece is of course the light square bishop. Now after move bishop to g4, knight to g4, and see now this knight is really well placed here. It cannot be kicked away by any minor piece on the board. Now with the move f3, we can support it further, and you look at this. This is a beautiful setup. All pawns are basically on light squares, so the pawns cannot be also attacked by the dark square bishop. So we have here really a brutal bad bishop position by black. So rook to f7, f3, rook to h8. We have queen to b2. This is now the main target. We have to agree, I think. e5 is a huge weakness in the position. We have rook to h5, rook to b7, queen to d8, and now this other rook comes also into the game. We have king to g8, and now king to f2, including simply the king into the game. Maybe there were better and more accurate moves, but I like this move because at least we can also try, if we get endangered, we can also escape with our king to d3, where it's perfectly fine because of the simplification of this position. There's not a good way here for black to attack the king on f2. Maybe you can create some checks, but as I said, the king will simply escape. You have still these problems on the 7th rank. So here rook to h1, e1, we have rook to a1, we have rook to h4, we have now beautiful move here, beautiful exchange sacrifice by Rameshbabu, rook takes c7. The problem is now if you play queen to c7, you get this one, knight to e5, and the problem is now if you play, for instance, something like rook to h7, in order to somehow get your both rooks into the game, the problem is this one, you get rook to a8, and you have to go here in front of the king, and now there are several nasty discovered checks by the queen, and this game is simply over. So in order to keep your chances after potential queen to c7 and knight to e5, you have to play rook to f8 in order to keep your 8th rank protected. But now knight to g6 is of course winning the game. You get the fork, and also there is this threat, if you for instance move the rook somewhere, you cannot actually move the rook somewhere, but also the queen is very dangerous on this diagonal. So this is also simply winning here for Babu. So here after rook to c7, as we said, queen to c7 is not working because of this tactic. Beautiful calculations by Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa. After move rook to c7, rook takes c7, and now queen to e5. That's the most important thing. The queen is coming into the game, and there are now even several tactical possibilities with the move knight to f6. This is now dangerous move. So that's why here rook to f7 was played by Nils Grandelius. We have queen to e6 attacking the pawn on g6, and now rook takes g4. We have queen to g4, queen to g7, queen to e6, and now okay, we have queen to h4, but it's not a problem. Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa kept his nerves, and he played simply king to e2, because if you play something like queen to g3 still with king to f1, you don't have any more checks, and you see now this pawn is weak, the rook can be included into the game. So again, it's a huge positional problem here for black. So after move king to e2, queen to g4, king to f1, and now queen to h4, king to g1, we have queen to f6, and okay, here Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa agrees. He simply trades off the queen, so queen takes f6, king to f6, but now king to f2, and the problem is now you see these two pawns are connected in the center, so this is now completely winning endgame here for white. So king to e5, we have king to e2, we have king to d4, rook to d1 was played here. Nils Grandelius retreated again, but for instance, if you take king to c4, then it's losing simply because of d6, and you can maybe try to get your king into the game, but now e5, then we play e6, you can maybe play rook to f6, but now you simply step back. If you take, of course, here the pawn, then simply pushing the pawn is winning for white. Rook to d6, rook takes, and now after king to d6, of course, we have the promotion, and it's game over. So that's why after move rook to d1, king to e5, rook to a1 was played by Praggnanandhaa, king to d4, and again a perpetual. But now Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa decided to of course not to play the 3 times the same position. If that happens, it will be a draw. King to d3, very important. It's the correct move because you have to include your king into the game. Here we have g5 by Nils Grandelius. Even if you try rook to a2, I've also analyzed this at home. If you play rook to a2, then king to b3 is actually a possibility, because you cannot take the pawn. That's the most important thing of this endgame, because black gets simply challenged, white is simply pushing the pawn. You can maybe try to include the rook into the game, but you see now d7, you have king to rook to h8, and now simple d8 promotion. It's game over here for black. So that's not an option. So after move king to c3, g5 was played by Grandelius. We have king to b3, g4, we have d6, we have g takes f3, g takes f3. Now we have king to e6, and now d7. Beautiful move here by Praggnanandhaa. Rook takes d7, rook takes d7, king to d7, and now after move king to a4 was played, king to c6, and now in this position after move e5, in this position Nils Grandelius resigned. So why did it resign? Because this is simply too far away. The king gets simply too far away from the action. You see, we can take out this one, and now we can take out this one. we can play here king to c, king takes e5, and now after move this one, black is simply losing, king to f5, king to d5, and this pawn is merging, and it's game over. So beautiful game by Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa. I really loved his opening prep. I like this early flank attack, then to go positionally into the game when he realized that after move e5 the bishop got blocked out, that we have a bad bishop strategy. Then he went into position trades of pieces, and you see now in the end game he actually won because of the supported pass pawn. You see why is it so important not to allow your opponent to create this strategical disadvantage for itself, because you see it was a simple win after this d5 move for Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa. Of course, there are many tactical possibilities, but so when the game reached the end game stage, it was simply game over then for black. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more games from this tournament, check out my coverage so far with some great games that we have analyzed before. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.